Let's withhold minerals to US. That is it. If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals. But the reality, they take our minerals, but say why we're withdrawing funding. No, we have minerals in the continent, and therefore we have something that we have. We're not just beggars, but we must just use that endowment for our benefit as a continent.
Bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals.
Well, the Americans have not hidden the reasons for those bases. They have made it very clear is to protect American interests in Africa. What are the American interests in Africa? The American interest in Africa is not to protect the African people. That's not an American interest. One discernible American interest in Africa is minerals, to protect their access to strategic minerals. Today, DRC holds about 70% of the world's cobalt deposits. Zambia, which is a neighbor to DRC, also has got huge deposits. Niger holds 70% of the world's uranium deposits. DRC has uranium, Zambia has uranium, Namibia has uranium. These are strategic minerals. These are what the Americans are protecting. Protecting from who? From us, the Africans, the owners of these minerals? Certainly not. They are trying to protect, to monopolize these minerals, these strategic minerals. Keep away primarily China.
The issue of critical minerals is also going to be discussed. We did make it clear to the United States that we have up to 9 critical minerals that they need in this country.
A major shift is unfolding in global trade, and it is sending shockwaves through markets, supply chains, and policy circles. Africa has taken coordinated steps to limit how critical minerals leave the continent, and the United States is now facing serious consequences. These minerals are not symbolic. They are essential for batteries, electric vehicles, defense systems, smartphones, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. Without steady access to them, entire industries feel pressure almost immediately. The facts are clear. Several African countries have moved to tighten export rules, raise local processing requirements, or redirect mineral supply toward new partners. These actions are legal under international trade rules. They are also strategic. African governments argue that for decades, raw materials left their borders with little long-term benefit for local economies. The new approach focuses on value addition, industrial development, and control over supply chains. For the United States, the timing is difficult. American companies rely heavily on imported cobalt, lithium, manganese, graphite, and rare earth elements. Many of these materials are concentrated in Africa. When access becomes limited or more expensive, costs rise across the economy. Battery makers feel it first, then car manufacturers, then technology firms, finally, consumers. Analysts warn that this is not a short-term disruption. It is part of a broader realignment of global trade. Africa is no longer positioning itself only as a supplier of raw materials. It is positioning itself as a gatekeeper. By controlling how minerals are processed and where they are sold, African countries increase their leverage. In negotiations with major powers, this shift did not happen overnight. Over the past decade, Africa invested in regional cooperation, mining regulations, and industrial policy. New refineries, processing plants, and transport corridors were planned. At the same time, demand for clean energy technologies surged worldwide. That demand made critical minerals more valuable than ever. The United States was aware of these trends, but policy responses were slow and often reactive. Trade tensions, domestic political debates, and supply chain disruptions from global crises distracted attention. Now the results are visible. Companies are scrambling to secure alternative sources, but substitutes are limited. Other regions do not have the same scale or concentration of these resources. This could mean higher production costs for American manufacturers. Electric vehicle targets may be delayed. Renewable energy projects could face budget overruns. Defense supply chains may require emergency adjustments. None of this implies collapse, but it does imply strain. Africa's position is strengthened by partnerships with other major economies. Long-term agreements with Asia, Europe, and Middle Eastern markets offer stable demand and financing for processing infrastructure. These partnerships often include technology transfer and local employment guarantees. From Africa's perspective, this approach reduces dependency and increases economic resilience. Analysts warn that once supply chains are restructured, they are difficult to reverse. Companies invest where rules are predictable. If Africa's new mineral policies remain consistent, businesses will adapt to them rather than wait for old arrangements to return. This could mean the United States faces a permanent reduction in bargaining power. There are also geopolitical implications. Access to critical minerals is increasingly tied to national security. When supply is uncertain, governments reassess alliances and strategies. Africa's decisions therefore influence not only markets but diplomacy. This adds weight to negotiations and raises the stakes for all parties involved. Some American officials argue that domestic mining could reduce dependence on imports. However, developing new mines takes years. Environmental reviews, community concerns, and infrastructure needs slow the process. Even if projects move forward, they may not fully replace African supply. This gap leaves a vulnerable window. This could mean increased competition among importing nations. Prices may rise as buyers bid for limited resources. Smaller economies could be priced out. Global inequality in access to clean technology may widen. These outcomes complicate climate goals and development plans. For Africa, the opportunity is significant but not without risk. Managing mineral wealth has historically been challenging. Corruption, environmental damage, and uneven development are real concerns. African leaders emphasize that new policies aim to avoid past mistakes. Stronger institutions, transparency measures, and regional standards are being discussed. Analysts warn that success depends on execution. If processing plants fail to deliver jobs or if revenues are mismanaged, public support could weaken. Global partners will also watch closely. Reliability matters as much as leverage. From the United States' perspective, the situation demands adaptation rather than confrontation. Trade pressure or threats are unlikely to change Africa's direction. Cooperation on technology, investment in local processing, and respect for development goals may offer better outcomes. This could mean a shift from extraction-focused relationships to partnership-based models. Markets have already reacted. Commodity prices show volatility. Investors reassess exposure to battery and automotive sectors. Supply chain managers update risk models. These are early signals of adjustment, not panic, but they underline how interconnected the global economy has become. Workers also feel the effects. If manufacturing slows or costs rise, employment growth may weaken in certain industries. At the same time, new jobs may emerge in recycling, efficiency improvements, and alternative materials research. Transition creates winners and losers, and managing that balance is a policy challenge. Africa's move also reshapes global narratives. The continent is often discussed as a passive player. This moment challenges that view. Strategic decisions made in African capitals now influence boardrooms and governments worldwide. That change in perception may be as important as the minerals themselves. This could mean future negotiations start from a different place. Africa enters talks with options, not just needs. Partners must compete on value, respect, and long-term commitment that changes behavior. The broader lesson is about preparedness. Reliance on concentrated supply chains carries risk. Diversification takes time. Ignoring signals can be costly. Analysts warn that similar dynamics may emerge in other sectors, from food to data infrastructure. As this story continues, headlines may focus on specific deals or disputes, but the deeper issue is structural. Control over resources shapes power. Africa is asserting that control. The United States must now decide how to respond in a way that protects its economy without undermining global cooperation. This moment is not about blame, it is about adjustment. The world economy is shifting toward multipolar influence. No single country can assume permanent access or dominance. Adaptability becomes the key advantage. As viewers consider these developments, one question remains at the center of the debate. In an era where resources define technological and economic leadership, how should nations balance competition with cooperation to secure their future? The consequences of this shift continue to unfold beyond minerals and markets, reaching into how countries plan their future security, technology, and economic stability. When access to critical materials becomes uncertain, governments are forced to rethink priorities that once felt guaranteed. The United States is now facing that reality in real time. Industries that depend on stable mineral supply are reviewing long-term strategies. Battery manufacturers are reassessing where they build plants. Technology companies are revisiting product timelines. Defense planners are examining stockpiles more closely. Analysts warn that even small disruptions can compound over time, especially when supply chains are already stretched by global demand. This could mean companies increase prices to protect margins. It could also mean delays in product launches or slower adoption of clean energy technologies. None of this signals immediate collapse, but it does signal friction. Friction raises costs, and higher costs ripple outward through the economy. One area drawing attention is recycling. With new mineral access more constrained, recovering materials from used electronics and batteries becomes more valuable. The United States has the technical capacity to expand recycling, but scaling it up takes investment and time. Analysts warn that recycling alone cannot fully replace primary mineral supply, at least not in the near future. Research into alternative materials is also accelerating. Scientists are exploring battery chemistries that rely less on cobalt or rare earth elements. This could mean long-term relief, but development cycles are slow. Until alternatives are commercially viable, dependence remains. Africa's approach highlights a broader trend among resource-rich regions. Countries are increasingly asking not just how much they export, but how exports shape their economies. Local processing creates jobs, skills, and tax revenue. It also gives governments more control over pricing and partnerships. This strategy aligns with industrial policies seen in other parts of the world. Analysts warn that ignoring this shift could leave importing nations isolated. Past assumptions that raw materials would always flow freely no longer hold. Trade relationships are becoming more conditional and more strategic. Trust, consistency, and mutual benefit now matter as much as price. For the United States, diplomatic engagement becomes critical, building long-term partnerships based on shared development. Goals may open doors that pressure cannot. Investment in local processing, training programs, and infrastructure can create mutual interest. This could mean moving from transactional trade to deeper cooperation. There is also a lesson here about timing. Africa's policies gained strength because they were implemented during a period of high global demand. Leverage increases when alternatives are limited. Analysts warn that other regions may follow similar paths when conditions allow. Financial markets are adjusting to this new reality. Investors are factoring geopolitical risk into commodity pricing more heavily. Long-term contracts are being reviewed. Volatility may persist as buyers and sellers renegotiate terms. This environment rewards flexibility and penalizes over-reliance on single sources. From a global perspective, climate goals are also affected. The transition to clean energy depends on minerals. If access becomes uneven, progress may slow in some regions while accelerating in others. This could mean uneven adoption of green technology, complicating international climate commitments. Africa's rise as a strategic actor reshapes diplomatic conversations. Decisions made on the continent now influence global agendas. This changes how Africa is perceived and how it negotiates. Analysts warn that underestimating this shift risks repeating past mistakes. For ordinary citizens, these developments may feel distant, but they have tangible effects. Prices, job opportunities, and technological access are all connected to supply chains. Understanding these links helps explain why distant policy decisions matter at home. The situation also raises questions about resilience. How prepared are economies for sudden changes in resource access? Diversification, stockpiling, and innovation all play roles. Analysts warn that resilience requires planning before crises emerge, not after. Africa's move does not close doors permanently. It changes the terms of entry. Partners willing to adapt may still participate. Those unwilling may find themselves sidelined. This dynamic encourages negotiation rather than confrontation. As months pass, more data will clarify the impact. Production numbers, investment flows, and trade balances will tell a clearer story. Early signs already suggest a shift toward long-term adjustment rather than short-term reversal. This moment reflects a broader transformation in the global order. Power is becoming more distributed. Control over key resources carries influence, but so does the ability to cooperate. The balance between these forces will shape the next decade. The United States now faces a choice: respond defensively or engage constructively, invest domestically while building respectful partnerships abroad, adapt policies to a world where access must be earned, not assumed. Africa, meanwhile, faces its own test. Turning leverage into lasting development requires discipline, transparency, and inclusive growth. Analysts warn that opportunity can be lost as easily as it is gained. As this story continues, the headlines may change, but the underlying question remains the same. In a world where critical resources define economic and technological leadership, how can nations compete without destabilizing the cooperation that global progress depends on?